Imagine a camp storage box that doubles as a kitchen, complete with a cutlery drawer, a stove, water on tap, everything including the kitchen sink. And it's not made of metal or plastic either. This is the Drifter 200. So a few people now have asked me about this kitchen because it's been in the background of a couple of videos. We've had it since 2019, and so I feel qualified now to give a pretty decent, honest review on it. The way we've used it is for family camping under the Oztent awning, the 4-wheel drive awning, or just under a tarp. I'm going to go through the setup briefly and talk about pros and cons, who they're suited to, and my own hot tips if you're looking at getting one. I've never had to set one up in a hurry before. Hopefully I don't embarrass myself, so let's do it. Bit of a strange bird's eye view camera footage, but I think this will show it the best. Make sure you're on level ground because the more level you are, the better. It's hard to level it once it's all set up. There's a few bungee loops on here, which you undo, which secure the lid. The lid hinges over, which exposes the top bench service on one side. The other bench is actually this front panel here. So it's got a bevel, which it slots into all the way down. So lift that up and out. That then exposes an inlay where the two uprights come out, and then on one of the shelves you'll have your shelving pieces. So starting on this side, grab one leg, one shelf. There's 2 bits of steel angle which slot into the kitchen, and then you grab your upright piece, slot that in, and then the bench just rests on top, and that side's done. Same thing on this side, 2 spots for the steel angle. I will get this ready on this side like this, so there's a slot on the shelf upright and another angle slots in there. They slot in there like so. Then the top piece, these 2 have spots to slot into as well. And that's pretty much it. There's a couple of extra things you do. Comes with 2 small red pins, and what these red pins do is stop this levering up and pulling out. So the red pins just hold this bench in spot, like so. So you can see how, in principle, you've got 2 benches with shelves underneath, and then you've got a space in the middle for a stove which is recessed to help with wind protection. Underneath that there's a cutlery drawer. Usually we store big things in the middle, knives and forks and spoons in that end, and admin things like fire lighters, spanners for the gas fittings, things like that in this side. Then the 3 shelves get larger as you go down. So in the top one we've got paper towel, bags, things like that. Got our kettle there. Next down, which we had these shelves stored on as well, in here. Got our basin as well as our hose and our tap, which I'll get to in a sec. And then down the bottom there's stacks of room for cook sets, pots and pans, fry pans, all your oils, your consumables, plates, bowls, cups, all that. You can see how it creates this home away from home. It's almost like your kitchen at home. You've got the benches, you've got the cooktop, and you've got storage underneath to put things and keep things nice and neat. It works really, really well like this. So it's got these Teflon strips on the backside of it as well as on the bottom of it. So if you wanted, you could store it face down and slide it into your vehicle or trailer that way. The downside of doing this is everything's going to rattle around and everything's going to be messed up every time you move it, because you're basically upending it and then bring it back up. So we've got the rubber matting in there, which I'll talk about a bit as well. I think that's a really good idea, but if you had to upend it and downend it, you'd want to put sort of matting on the back wall as well, so that as things tip up and down, it doesn't damage the plywood and rattle around too much. For the most part, I think most people are going to keep these upright.
A quick side note, guys, I intended to film this while we were down at Cape La Trappe last month, but we had to call it short to escape strong southerly winds hitting the campsite. We had a great time though, exploring, swimming. Family time is always time well spent. Paisley's grandparents also made an appearance, which was nice too. Glad we got home when we did overall, because we would have had to deal with more than just the wind.
So with a couple more minutes set up, you can have it looking like this. It's good to unpack the cupboard space and the storage space onto the shelves so that it's easier to get to things. Otherwise, you're going to be constantly huddling and crouching down trying to get things. Starting on this side, we've got a water jerry connected to a hose, which goes up to this hand pump, Brayha hand pump. We got Drifter to drill a hole in this bench so that we can secure this hand pump here. Usually we keep one side for prep, one side for cleaning up and just as general bench space. Chopping board, some cork boards for putting hot things off the stove. If we leave the kettle here, we tend to use that a lot, so we just leave that up, set up. That's really good. The gas tube, there's a hole in the kitchen here. I'll put some B-roll up. That feeds down into the gas bottle, and so that is nice and tucked away out of the way. On this side, we tend to do washing up. They keep the trough here, and then on this shelf, plates and bowls and consumables and stuff. The good size eskies and ice boxes fit under the shelves perfectly, like this one, and also the milk crate we've got on this side. If you're interested in these Drifter products, then I made a review on this milk crate bag system, which you might enjoy as well, so check that out. You can see how this is just super convenient, as if you're almost at home. You know, imagine being out camping or out on holiday or something. You roll out of the tent, out of the caravan, out of the camper trailer. You know, you stand here, you basically start your bacon and eggs, you could start your coffee. Everything's just so conveniently laid out. And that's the real beauty of this thing, is there's a heap of storage in there, and you can generally use it in quite a functional way once it's set up. So the main pros of this kitchen are it's exceptionally convenient to use once it's set up. And also, I would say there's just a massive amount of storage space inside. So even once I've fully loaded it, there's usually a lot of air in there. So you could fit a whole lot of canned food, non-perishable foods, that sort of thing in there if that's what you want to do. Or just have a really elaborate camping setup where you've got basically every utensil and every pot and pan you could think of like you would at home. There's really tons of room in there if you want to utilize it properly. The main cons I can think of, there's two. One is it can get quite awkward and heavy as a one-person lift. So because it's a box and it's flat on all four sides, you can't get your knees under it when you're lifting it. And so no matter what you do, it's just an awkward carry. So you've got to be ready for that. I wouldn't say it's necessarily extremely heavy unless you load it up to the absolute hilt, but it's just the shape plus the weight of it that makes it really awkward to carry. The other thing that I think of is this is a standard 2-burner stove that we got from Bunnings, the Gasmate one, hardware store in Australia. This is basically the most basic gas burner stove you can get that runs on LPG. You know, this works perfect for us and we don't need anything else, but I know that we were looking around at other stoves at one point, and most of the ones, the fancier 2-burner stoves, are all much bigger, either wider and taller, and probably won't fit in here. So just be careful. If you've got a stove that you really like to use, make sure it fits. And my guess would be, if it's a nice aftermarket, expensive brand sort of one, it probably won't go in here very well. That being said though, Drifter are known for customizing things to suit your needs. So if that's the case, I'd talk to them and see if you can get a custom size top section made so that you can fit your stove in. But that suited us, but it is a limitation. They do make a Drifter 300, which is for a 3-burner stove. It's significantly larger, I thought, and probably not practical for most family situations. They also make a 100, which uses the small butane cylinder stoves, so that's narrower. That might suit your needs better and be a bit smaller to fit in the car. And they also make a Drifter Mini, which is designed to sit, Drifter Mini 100, I think they call it, and they sit that on top of a table to then pull out and stuff. So it's basically half the height. So yeah, consider the stove when you're buying one. Who are they best suited to? I think these are really well suited to families that are stopping and propping in one spot for a couple of days or more. Even if you're a couple and you just want a stress-free camp spot or a base camp where you're going off and doing day walks or some other activity and you want to come back and you've just got this nice home away from home, as I called it, that'd be excellent too. An underrated or unthought of use for these, I think, could be in community groups, either a scout group or a men's shed or something like that. Think of having to make coffees for a lot of people in a remote location, or think of having all your sausage sizzle gear underneath and then just doing the onions on top next to the barbecue, something like that. I think that's fairly underrated and could be thought of as a good community box or investment. Because I said most people will store them upright, and from what I gather, that's how they've been designed. You either need a fairly tall wagon or 4-wheel drive to fit them in the back, or they're really well suited to box trailers or ute trays. So I think a lot of people will have them on utes or trailers. If you've got a fridge, like say a 40 litre or 60 litre fridge in the back of your 4-wheel drive on one side, then having this standing upright on the other, you're not going to get much else in there. So you really need to have a plan, and because you'll just be putting those two things in and stuffing things in over the top. We usually put jerry cans far forward against the passenger seats to get the weight behind, as close to the wheels as we can, and then pack those big items in, and then other things go in around it. It's a consideration. It's not an easy shape to transport in that upright position. So yeah, I think they're best suited to people that are, family camping for a couple of days, where you get the most out of the convenience. If you were touring, stopping every night, changing location, then this might get a bit tiresome, packing up, setting up, packing up, setting up. And just because of that awkward lift in and out of your vehicle. I think if you're stopping all the time, then something more permanent, like a pull-out kitchen in either a trailer or a vehicle, will be a better setup than this. But there's a real market, I think, for people that are loading up to go away at Christmas and New Year, or go away a handful of times a year, but just want that sturdy, rugged, good solution. And this is where that feels, I think, in the market. All right. So as the story goes, Luke the Drifter was travelling up the west coast of America, having swapped jobs and gone AWOL from the military in Australia. He had a mate in Washington State, and he ended up getting a job as a mule packer in the Cascade Mountain Ranges in Washington State. I've got a few subscribers from Australia, about 20% of my viewers, so if you're from that part of the world or have visited that area, I'd be really interested to hear. Anyway, so packing mules, basically on horseback, you lead a string of mules that are packed, and Luke the drifter saw these boxes, and you'd have to evenly distribute the weight. So they'd have these two big boxes, one on each side, hanging off a mule. And basically, in his trips in and out of Washington State, setting up for tourists packing mules, he basically designed almost this exact thing in his head. So when he did eventually come back to Australia, he made one in his garage with his brother, and then they started selling them at shows. And this is how Luke pulled himself up by his bootstraps and made something, and basically, in my opinion, became an Australian inventor and innovator. Before Drifter did canvas, before they made drawers, before they made trailers, they made kitchens, and this is really the very first design. Luke made a great video in 2019, just before I bought this actually, on that story, and went through how the design hasn't changed. So number one, they can't get a hold of, but number two, the second one of these ever made, looks almost identical to this, so it's barely undergone any changes at all. That's a really excellent video to watch. Mr. Buckaroony also did a great video on these, supporting that video that Luke made, so I'd recommend watching that one too. And the third video, which may not be as obvious if you're looking for Drifter kitchen videos, is a video made by Ronnie Dull, where he went to do a visit to the Drifter fans event, but before that he visited Drifter HQ. Actually, I think the interview is actually at the Drifter fan event, but Ronnie interviews Luke, and they have a really intimate discussion, and Luke gives up a lot of really warm, nice details about that story that I just hatcheted. So have a look at that one. I really recommend it. This was the first purchase, or in the first purchase that I ever bought from Drifter, having looked at their website for a couple of years, looking at their stuff. At the time, I couldn't justify the price of buying high quality Australian camping gear. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a romantic pull towards it. It's the first Drifter kitchen item, or the first Drifter item ever designed, and it's also the first item that I bought, so I feel like I've bought into the quintessential spirit of Drifter, if that makes any sense. In the same way that I own the Snow Peak Fire Pit over any other, and a few other camping bits and pieces too. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the emotive part of it, where I feel like I'm part of something or a greater movement. I don't know. All I'm saying is I'm not kidding myself. This thing makes me really proud to own, and I think it's really cool. When I bought it, I got the canvas bag with it, which at the time was a bit non-standard, but I'm pretty sure they're used to making them fairly routinely now for this kitchen. If you're storing it in humidity or in any damp conditions, or just, anywhere really, it's the general dampness that's going to kill it, not the couple of days you do camping here and there, or the couple of weeks you're using it. It's that slow burn where, there might be some dampness, and that's what'll protecting it with a canvas cover, is when you're storing it, is what will make it last in the long run. Also, if you're strapping it down in the back of a ute or exposed in a box trailer, I would definitely get the canvas cover. You could almost sort of strap it and leave it in your ute, or leave it in your trailer outside if you've got a canvas cover. But look, the craftsmanship is incredible on this thing. All the joinery, the silicone, everything's really spot on. But it's still plywood, and eventually the varnish will wear off. To prolong that, I'd definitely get the cover and try to look after it. Another tip I've got is get yourself a dolly to put it on in your garage or your shed. It's one of those things that no matter where you put it in your shed or your garage, it's always in the way. So you're always going to be constantly moving it. At least that's what I find. So get one of those, and then the added benefit is you don't have to carry it as much to your vehicle. You can roll it everywhere, and also it'll stop you having to sit it on the ground, so you'll get less moisture, less dampness coming up, so you're going to prolong the life of it as well. In terms of other tips, you can see we've got this rubber matting. We've put that on every single shelf. If you were tipping it down backward as well, I'd probably look at using adhesive and putting it on the back wall as well as this bottom wall. But we just let it sit there, and that does the job. Again, that'll prolong the life of it because you're not having things rub around and scratch the plywood, and it's just less noisy in the car. There's nothing worse than having things rattle around. What else can I say? These loops here on the end, am I going to be in the shot here? I'll just move the camera just a little. So these bungee loops which secure the lid on are excellent for just putting hanging a towel on. So that's my pro tip there, just hang the towels on there. And one thing we're looking at is getting a dish rack. You know, having this basin here is good, but you generally need one person washing, one person drying. So get a nice dish rack of some kind, so that, you know, if you just want to let things dry naturally, you can. Cool. One last thing I'll mention, just adjust the camera again slightly. This finish, I didn't ask for this black laminate finish. It came with it anyway. I think it's usually seen as an upgrade. I see now on the website that if you want one, you can't get it in with this finish. It says, you know, clear lacquer only. So, you know, I've got this, but if you're looking at getting one, you won't have that same finish. So in summary, this is an excellent kitchen if you're a family and you're setting up in one spot for at least a couple of days. It's best suited to the back of a ute or a box trailer because of its awkward standing up shape. That being said though, if you're willing to set it up and pack it up regularly, then it's also an excellent option for touring, but it just lacks that convenience that you've got from a pull-out kitchen from a vehicle or a trailer. This is Drifter's very first camp kitchen design, or you could say Drifter's first design of anything, and I'm proud to own something that's Australian made with such craftsmanship. Thanks very much for watching. Look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.